The Eterna drifted silently through the void, its engines humming as Captain Ilara Voss leaned forward in her command chair. The bridge was dimly lit, with holographic redouts casting a cold blue glow over her sharp features. A faint, intermittent signal played over the comms, distorted, haunting, and ancient. "Are you sure it's not just static?" Chief Engineer Nolan Riker muttered, his brows furrowed as he adjusted the signal scanner. "Static doesn't repeat every 40 seconds, Ilara replied. Her dark eyes flicked to the holographic display. The waveform of the signal pulsed rhythmically, a ghostly echo from a system long thought dead. This is deliberate. The signal had originated from Lyra 7, a system abandoned after its star collapsed into a white dwarf decades ago. What could still be broadcasting from a graveyard like that? "Captain," said Aisha Torin, the ship's communications officer, her voice edged with tension. "I've cleaned up the signal as much as possible. You'll want to hear this." Ilara gestured for her to play it. The bridge fell silent as the distorted audio filled the air. "To all surviving forces of humanity, this is inaudible. Critical. Activate. Solon Project. Last hope. Repeat. Solon Project." A shiver ran down Ilara's spine. Solon Project. What is that? "Never heard of it," Nolan admitted, crossing his arms. "Whatever it is," Aisha said, "someone wanted humanity to find it. And they wanted it badly enough to set up a beacon to run long after their time." Ilara stared at the star map. Lyra 7 was in unclaimed space, far from any colony or outpost, and dangerously close to Zenith Accord patrol routes. The Accord, ruthless enforcers of galactic order, wouldn't hesitate to destroy anyone trespassing near their borders. "Captain, are we seriously considering this?" Nolan asked. "That system's a death trap, and we have no idea what's waiting for us." Ilara stood, her expression resolute. "This isn't just any random signal. If this Solon Project is even remotely real, it could be the key to uniting what's left of humanity. We're going." The crew exchanged uneasy glances, but knew better than to argue. Ilara Voss had earned her reputation for taking impossible risks and making them work. The Eterna slipped into Lyra 7 hours later, emerging from the warp in the shadow of the system's white dwarf. The dying star cast an eerie, pale light across the wreckage of orbital stations and shattered ships. "Multiple debris fields," Nolan reported. "Looks like there was a battle here, a big one." "Focus on the signal," Ilara ordered. Aisha tightened her grip on her console. "I got a lock. It's coming from that station," she said, pointing to a crumbling structure spinning slowly in the void. "Prepare for boarding," Ilara commanded. As the Eterna approached, the signal grew louder, almost frantic. The station loomed ahead like a ghost of the past, its dark halls promising answers. And danger. "Whatever's in there," Ilara muttered, "it better be worth it." And with that, the Eterna docked, its crew stepping into the unknown. The air inside the abandoned station was thick with the scent of rust and decay. The Lara's boots echoed across the metal floors as she led her crew down the narrow, dimly lit corridor. The only sound was the hum of the station's emergency power systems, flickering lights that barely cut through the gloom. The silence was unnerving. "Not a soul in sight," Nolan remarked, his voice a low murmur. "This place has been empty for decades." "Maybe too empty," Aisha said, her eyes darting from one shadowed corner to the next. "Something doesn't feel right." Ilara nodded but pressed on. "Stay sharp. We don't know what we're dealing with here." They reached the central command hub after what felt like hours of navigating through crumbling hallways and sealed doors. The room was a mess of discarded data pads and forgotten tech. But at the far end, an old terminal flickered to life, the source of the signal. Aisha approached it carefully, her fingers dancing over the ancient console. The screen was covered in static, but as she adjusted the controls, the signal cleared. Words appeared in jagged letters across the screen. "Activate the Solon Project. Humanity's final hope." "This is it," Ilara said, a mixture of excitement and caution in her voice. We found it. But before Aisha could interact further, a low rumble shook the station, followed by the screech of metal against metal. Ilara's hand instinctively reached for her weapon. Something's moving out there, Nolan warned, scanning the darkened corridors. It's too quiet. Ilara gestured for everyone to take cover. The rumble grew louder, and then the emergency alarms blared to life, filling the station with a blinding red light. Enemies inbound. Aisha yelled, her voice panicked. Shut that console down, Ilara ordered, her tone sharp. We've overstayed our welcome. But as Aisha tried to disconnect the terminal, a series of blinding flashes from the station's observation windows lit up the void outside. Ilara's heart sank. A fleet of ships, sleek and menacing, dropped out of warp, surrounding the station like a deadly net. The Zenith Accord, Ilara muttered under her breath. They found us. Suddenly, the door to the command hub slammed open, and heavily armored figures stormed in. Zenith soldiers, their faces obscured by black visors, their weapons raised. Without a word, they opened fire, forcing Ilara and her crew to dive for cover. Return fire, Ilara barked, drawing her sidearm. Her crew responded in kind, weapons discharging in sharp bursts. The chaos of the firefight filled the air as they fought back the attackers. But the odds were stacked against them. The Zenith soldiers were elite, trained to handle exactly this kind of situation. They pressed forward, pushing the crew back into a corner. Ilara's pulse quickened as she realized they were outnumbered and outgunned. We need to get out of here, Nolan shouted. There's no way we'll survive a full-scale assault. But just as all seemed lost, a new voice cut through the chaos. Enough. The sound came from the doorway, and all eyes turned. Standing in the shadows of the corridor, silhouetted by the red emergency lights, was a figure. Tall, confident, and undeniably powerful. Captain Ilara Voss. The figure spoke again, voice calm yet commanding. I am Kiran Solon, and I am humanity's last hope. The room fell into a stunned silence. The figure in the doorway stepped forward, his presence commanding the room like an electric charge. The Zenith soldiers, momentarily thrown off by his sudden appearance, lowered their weapons. Kiran Solon's armor gleamed darkly in the red light, adorned with ancient symbols, their meaning lost to time. His face was obscured by a sleek visor, but his voice carried a weight that settled deep into Ilara's chest. Stand down. Kiran's voice boomed, rich with authority. The station is no longer under Zenith control. Ilara remained frozen in place, her hand still gripping her sidearm. She knew better than to trust a stranger in a combat situation, but there was something in the man's tone that commanded both caution and curiosity. We're not here to fight, Ilara said slowly, her eyes narrowing. Who are you? Kiran tilted his head slightly, as though pondering the question. I am the last heir to the Solon dynasty, the legacy that once held the knowledge and power to protect humanity from extinction. The words hung in the air like a heavy mist. The Solon dynasty. The name echoed in the deepest recesses of history, but it was little more than a myth to most people. The lost legacy of an ancient Earth empire that had supposedly fallen long ago. Yet here, in front of her, stood a man claiming to be its heir. The Solon dynasty. I thought that was just a legend, Aisha said, her voice filled with disbelief. It was, Kiran replied, taking the slow step forward. His voice was steady, unshaken by the tension in the room. But history has a way of hiding its truths. The Solon dynasty was the last line of defense for humanity in its darkest days, before we scattered to the stars. Our mission was to prepare for the rise of the Zenith Accord, to safeguard the future of humanity. Ilara's mind raced. If the Solon dynasty's legacy was real, and if this man truly was its heir, then this could change everything. The war with the Zenith Accord had already cost Earth too much, an empire built on its past power, and a future dictated by the stars, yet always in the shadow of the Accord's iron grip. Kieran gestured behind him, to the station's decaying command hub. You've activated the Solon Project, the last safeguard humanity has. And now the Zenith Accord will stop at nothing to ensure its secrets stay buried. They cannot know what you've uncovered here. But what exactly is the Solon Project? Ilara asked, still on edge. What does it have to do with humanity's future? Kieran's eyes, barely visible through his visor, seemed to soften for a moment. It's not a weapon, Captain. It's the key to unlocking a new path for humanity, a future free from the shackles of the Zenith Accord. But it must be activated correctly, or it will be nothing more than a relic of a forgotten past. Aisha stepped forward, her curiosity winning over her skepticism. And you're the only one who can activate it. Kieran didn't answer immediately. Instead, he scanned the room, his hand resting on the hilt of a blade that hung at his side. The weight of the silence between them seemed to stretch for an eternity. Not just me, Kieran said finally. There is another, someone who shares my blood. But time is running out. The Zenith Accord is already preparing to strike. Ilara's stomach tightened. And you're leading us into a war we may not win. Kieran's response was unwavering. I'm leading you into a future we can't afford to ignore. With that, he turned, motioning for the crew to follow. You're the last hope, Captain, and you will carry humanity's legacy into the stars. The crew of the Eterna followed Kieran Solon through the derelict station, a mixture of confusion and awe settling on their shoulders. Ilara, her mind racing with the implications of Kieran's words, remained silent. If what he claimed was true, if the Solon dynasty had truly protected humanity from the shadows, then the future of the galaxy rested in her hands. But everything felt so uncertain, like a puzzle missing its most crucial pieces. The hallways grew colder as they descended deeper into the station's bowels, where ancient, untouched chambers awaited. Kieran led them to a massive vault door, its surface etched with symbols that seemed to glow faintly in the low light. This is it, Kieran said, turning to face them. The Solon Code is inside this vault. It's the key to unlocking the next phase of humanity's survival. What exactly is the Solon Code? Aisha asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. She was clearly skeptical, still not fully convinced by the man's claims. Kieran paused before answering. It's a data matrix, a record of humanity's most advanced technologies, knowledge, and strategies from the time of the Solon dynasty. But it's more than that. It contains a series of protocols, a blueprint for a new order. It can dismantle the Zenith Accord's power, if used correctly. So why not just use it to defeat them? Nolan interjected, his arms crossed as he eyed the vault. Why go through all the trouble? The code must be deciphered, and only the heir of the Solon dynasty can unlock its full potential. Kieran's voice softened, almost wistful. I've spent years trying to access it, but I need the right counterpart to complete the process. The counterpart? Ilara repeated, her curiosity piqued. What do you mean? Kieran's visor gleamed, but his expression remained hidden. The Solon Project is a genetic key. Only the combined blood of two Solon heirs can activate its full power. I'm one, but there's another. A child, hidden away, who holds the key to humanity's future. Ilara felt the weight of his words settle into her chest like a stone. A child. A second heir. Could this be the same child the Zenith Accord was hunting for? Could it be someone among the crew? Before she could voice her questions, a sharp, unfamiliar sound broke the silence. It was the unmistakable hum of ships, large ships, approaching at full speed. The Zenith Accord's fleet is inbound, Kieran said, his voice tense. They must have tracked us here. The urgency in his words snapped Ilara into action. We need to secure the code. Now. Nolan immediately began scanning the vault door. This thing's locked down tight. We'll need time to override the security. We don't have time, Ilara said, her voice steady. Aisha, get the main console online. Kieran, what's the override code? Kieran stepped forward, his hand hovering over a terminal beside the vault door. I'll handle it. You just prepare the ship. The moment we open this, we'll have no choice but to leave. Fast. As Kieran entered a series of commands, the air in the room thickened with anticipation. The flickering lights above them cast long shadows over the crew. They could feel the Zenith Accord's fleet growing closer with each passing moment. The vault door groaned, and then began to slowly open, its massive hinges creaking in protest. Inside was a console, glowing with a soft, pulsing light, awaiting Kieran's final command. "Get ready," Kieran said, his eyes narrowing as he stepped forward. The future of humanity is about to be revealed. But as the vault door swung open fully, the crew of the Eterna found themselves staring not just at the unknown. It was something far darker. An ominous shadow moved within the vault, sending chills down Ilara's spine. The true test was just beginning. The vault's door creaked to a halt, revealing a dimly lit chamber lined with technology Ilara could only barely comprehend. The air was thick with the hum of machinery long dormant, and at the center of it all stood a massive crystalline structure, its surfaces covered with intricate symbols, glowing faintly in an eerie shade of blue. Ilara's crew stepped cautiously into the room, weapons ready but lowered. The faint glow from the crystalline structure illuminated their faces, casting long shadows across the floor. The sense of danger had not passed, but the mystery of the place held them in rapt attention. Kieran moved toward the crystalline core with purpose, his boots echoing softly on the metal floor. As he approached, a faint sound began to reverberate throughout the chamber, a low mechanical hum that seemed to vibrate through Ilara's very bones. "This," Kieran said, his voice reverberating with quiet reverence, "is the Solan Code, the last legacy of my ancestors. It holds the secrets of Earth's greatest power, the power that could change everything." He raised a gloved hand to touch the surface of the crystal. But as his fingers made contact, the chamber trembled. The once dormant machinery hummed louder, its energy surging. Suddenly, a sharp crack split the air, and the crystal fractured, revealing something that no one had expected. A figure emerged from within, tall, imposing, and cloaked in armor. It wasn't human. The figure's face was obscured by a helmet, but the outline of its features was unmistakably alien. Its black armor seemed to absorb the light, making it appear as if the darkness itself had taken form. Ilara's pulse quickened as the figure's glowing eyes locked onto Kieran. "Traitor," the figure intoned, its voice cold and metallic. "You have awakened what should remain dormant." Kieran's posture stiffened, but he didn't retreat. Instead, he faced the alien with unwavering resolve. "You," Kieran's voice faltered only for a moment, "you were never supposed to be here." Ilara's mind raced as she took a step forward. "Who are you?" The figure's helmeted gaze shifted toward her, its presence as chilling as the cold metal that encased it. "I am the guardian of the Solan Project," the creature said, its voice laced with venom. "I have waited millennia for someone to release me. And now, the reckoning begins." Before anyone could react, the chamber's lights flickered violently, and alarms blared once more. The sudden noise sent a jolt of fear through the crew. In an instant, the alien guardian raised its arm, and a bolt of crackling energy shot out, slamming into the far wall. The metal buckled under the force of the blast, and the room shuddered violently. Ilara instinctively pulled her crew into a defensive position. "Weapons up. We don't know what we're dealing with." Kieran stepped forward, holding his hands out, not in aggression but in an attempt to reason with the guardian. "This isn't what you think," he said, his voice low but firm. "You've been tricked. The Solan Code was never meant to keep humanity in chains. It's meant to set us free. Freed from the Zenith Accord, from their control. You were part of a larger plan." The Guardian's eyes flickered with an unreadable emotion. For a moment, the tension in the air seemed to ease, but only for a moment. "Foolish human," the Guardian growled. "The Zenith Accord has already claimed victory over your kind. The Solan Project was never meant to liberate you. It was meant to destroy you." Before Karen could respond, the ground shook again, this time from a deeper, more terrifying tremor. The walls of the chamber groaned under the weight of an approaching storm, and Ilara knew with sickening certainty that whatever was coming was far worse than anything they had faced before. "We need to leave. Now," Nolan shouted, his voice urgent. But Karen was already at the crystal again, his hand reaching for the controls. "We must finish what we started. Humanity's legacy is at stake." The Guardian stepped forward, blocking their path. "Then you will die with your legacy." As the Guardian's weapon powered up, Ilara could hear the faint hum of a fleet outside, closing in. The Zenith Accord was here, and their battle for humanity's future was only just beginning. The air in the chamber crackled with tension, the silent hum of the alien Guardian's weapon growing louder with every passing second. Ilara's heart raced, but she remained focused. The stakes had never been higher. Humanity's future, the legacy of the Solon dynasty, and even their lives now hung in the balance. The Guardian's glowing eyes narrowed as it raised its weapon, a sleek, shimmering energy cannon that pulsed ominously. The entire chamber seemed to hold its breath, the walls vibrating under the pressure of the looming attack. "We can't win this fight," Aisha murmured, her weapon trained on the Guardian, but her voice laced with doubt. "Not unless we know its weakness." Ilara's mind raced. What did Kieran mean when he said the Guardian was tricked? Could they somehow turn the tables? They needed more information. Fast. Kieran, standing in front of the crystal, seemed to be reaching for something deeper, his hands trembling as he manipulated the interface. "There's more to the Solon code than just weapons and power," he said, his voice strained. "It holds a key to neutralizing this Guardian. If we can tap into it." "Can you hurry up with that?" Nolan snapped, his eyes never leaving the towering figure that loomed before them. But the Guardian's voice cut through their thoughts like a blade. "Your attempts are futile, humans. The Solon project was never yours to command. The time for your rebellion has ended." The weapon powered up, casting a sickly light across the room. But just as the Guardian was about to unleash its deadly energy, a sharp, distorted signal crackled through the comms. An emergency broadcast from the Eterna. "Captain." It was Terran, the ship's communications officer, his voice urgent and tight with fear. "We've got incoming ships, hundreds of them. Zenith Accord's fleet is here. We can't hold them off much longer." Ilara cursed under her breath. The last thing they needed right now was an all-out battle with the Zenith Accord on top of everything else. Kieran glanced toward the door, his face tight with concentration. "We need to finish this, Ilara. If we can unlock the full potential of the code, we can disable the Guardian's weapon, and buy us the time we need to escape." Before Ilara could respond, the chamber shook again, a deafening roar coming from somewhere deep within the station. The structure itself was starting to collapse, the walls groaning under the weight of something huge, something alive. "The Eterna won't hold them off forever," Nolan said, his voice calm but laced with urgency. "We don't have time for some grand reveal, Kieran. We need a solution now." Kieran's fingers flew over the controls as his voice became more urgent. "The Solon code. It's a two-part system. I need." But before he could finish, a high-pitched whine filled the chamber, and the air seemed to warp. A blast of energy shot out from the Guardian, the force of it tearing through the floor and sending Ilara and her crew sprawling. The room twisted in a blur of light and shadow. When Ilara regained her footing, she saw something that made her stomach drop. From the heart of the vault, the broken remains of the crystal had begun to glow brighter, casting strange, shifting patterns across the room. Something ancient and alive was awakening, feeding off the chaos. The Guardian stepped forward, its armor rippling with unnatural energy, its eyes fixed on Kieran. "You've done nothing but seal your fate, human," the Guardian intoned, its voice a low growl. "This station is my prison, but now I am free. And with my freedom, you will die." Kieran's eyes flickered with panic. "No, The code isn't meant for this. It can't. But before he could finish, a new voice, distorted and robotic, boomed through the chamber, interrupting everything. Code recognized. Proceed with activation. The voice wasn't from the Guardian. It was from the ancient machinery within the vault, responding to something Kieran had activated. With a blinding flash of light, the ground beneath them split open, and massive metallic tendrils shot from the floor, wrapping around the Guardian in a flash. The alien creature howled in fury as it was ensnared by the ancient mechanisms, its weapon discharging wildly, but it was held fast. The glow of the crystal shifted, now golden instead of blue, and a calm, robotic voice continued. Guardian Containment Protocol initiated. Solon Project Level 3 activation complete. The twist of fate was almost too much to comprehend. The Guardian was trapped, its power nullified. But the sound of the approaching Zenith Accord fleet was still too close, and the Eterna was fighting a losing battle. Ilara turned to Kieran. What now? Kieran's face was pale, but a spark of hope ignited in his eyes. Now we finish what we started. The code will save us. It has to. But the true test was yet to come. The code was in their hands, but could they survive long enough to use it? The air in the chamber was thick with tension, and the hum of ancient machinery reverberated through the walls as the Guardian struggled against the metallic tendrils that now held it captive. Ilara's mind raced. What had they unleashed? The Solon code had activated in a way they hadn't anticipated, turning the tables for the moment. But it wasn't enough. The Zenith Accord's fleet was coming, and they had no idea how long the containment on the Guardian would last. We don't have time, Kieran muttered, his fingers dancing across the control panel, trying to make sense of the fragmented data spilling out in front of him. The Solon code had changed. It was no longer just a weapon or a tool. It was now a lifeline, a delicate thread holding their future together. But its true power was still locked away, and Kieran wasn't sure they had the knowledge or the time to fully unlock it. Ilara, Aisha said urgently, her voice tense. We're running out of time. The fleet won't be delayed for long. Ilara's mind raced, but she kept her focus sharp. The Eterna was still fighting above them, holding its ground, but the odds were quickly turning against them. She could hear the distant roar of battleships exchanging fire, the thrum of their weapons filling the air. They had seconds, maybe minutes at best. We need to get out of here, Nolan said, his eyes scanning the room for any possible escape route. This station's falling apart, and if we don't move soon, we'll be caught in the collapse. Not without the code, Kieran snapped, his voice full of desperation. We can't leave it behind. Humanity's survival is tied to this. We can't activate it without understanding it. Ilara interrupted, a sharp edge to her voice. You said it yourself, Kieran. It's too dangerous if we don't know what we're dealing with. Kieran's face tightened, frustration flickering in his eyes. I know, but I'm close. I can feel it. Suddenly, the ground trembled again, more violently this time. The station was beginning to buckle, massive chunks of metal falling from the ceiling and crashing to the floor. A loud boom echoed through the chamber, followed by the sound of structural beams snapping under pressure. The space was collapsing faster than Ilara could process. Now or never, Ilara said, her voice hard with determination. She looked toward Kieran, who was still absorbed in the code's interface, his face pale but resolute. I'm trying, Kieran murmured, his eyes darting over the readouts as they flashed in rapid succession. If I can just input the final sequence. But before he could finish, the entire chamber lit up with a harsh, searing light. A low mechanical groan filled the air, and the Guardian's struggles intensified. The tendrils wrapped around it tightened, locking it in place, but the creature's power only seemed to grow as it thrashed. Ilara stepped forward, her hand instinctively resting on her weapon, but she kept her focus on Kieran. They needed to get out of here, but the way forward was blocked, both by the Guardian and by the imminent collapse of the station. Ilara, Kieran said, his voice now urgent. "I think I've unlocked it. The code. It can end the Zenith Accord's grip on the galaxy, but we have to be quick." Before Ilara could respond, the Guardian let out a guttural roar, its eyes blazing with fury. The tendrils began to crackle with energy, and the walls around them shook as the entire station groaned in protest. "Ilara," Karen shouted, eyes wide with fear. "We need to get to the control room. It's the only way to activate the full potential of the code." The distant sound of incoming Zenith ships grew louder. The fleet was almost upon them. "Lead the way," Ilara said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "We'll hold them off as long as we can." Karen nodded, and they ran, dashing through the crumbling halls of the station, debris falling around them with every step. The air was thick with smoke, the flashing red lights warning them of imminent danger. The station was dying, and so was their time. Behind them, the Guardian's roar echoed again, but this time it was different. There was an almost pleading tone beneath the fury, a hint of desperation that cut through the chaos. Karen glanced back briefly. "We can't let it break free." Not yet. The control room was only a few corridors away, but every second they spent moving through the station felt like an eternity. The Zenith Accord was drawing closer. The war for humanity's future had just begun, and the outcome would depend on whether Karen could unlock the full power of the Solan Code, or if it would be too late. The control room loomed ahead, a distant promise of salvation. Ilara's lungs burned as she pushed herself faster, adrenaline coursing through her veins. Karen's desperate hands worked frantically at his console, inputting commands as the room around them shuddered with the force of the station's collapse. "We're almost there," Nolan shouted from the rear, covering their backs as best he could. He fired off a shot at the encroaching Zenith soldiers, but their numbers were overwhelming. The space station had become a battlefield, every step forward hard-won, every moment stretching the limits of their endurance. Ilara glanced at Karen. His face was pale, beads of sweat dripping down his forehead as he fought to make sense of the fragments of the Solan Code flashing on the screen. His fingers trembled over the controls, but his determination was unyielding. "How much longer?" she demanded, her voice sharp with urgency. "Just a few more adjustments," Karen replied, his voice strained but resolute. The input lines blurred before his eyes as he scrambled to unlock the code's final layer. The walls groaned as they neared the control room's reinforced door, and Ilara felt the familiar hum of the Eterna's battle in the distance. Time was running out. The station's defenses were weakening. The Zenith Fleet's ships had already begun to fire on the station's outer hull, and the inevitable breach would come any second. Ilara slammed her fist against the control room door, impatient. "We don't have time for this, Karen. Do it now." "I'm trying." Karen yelled back, his voice cracking under the strain. "I have to." Before he could finish, the doors to the control room slammed open, revealing the dark, sleek interior. They rushed inside, but no sooner had they entered than the walls rattled again. The sound of a blast filled the air, and the lights flickered erratically. The Zenith Accord's forces had breached the outer chamber. The countdown was on. In the center of the room, a massive terminal loomed before them. Its interface was older than anything they had encountered before, covered in symbols that pulsed faintly. Karen wasted no time as he slid into the seat before it, his hands flying over the controls, trying to stabilize the system. "Get ready," Karen said through gritted teeth. "This will either work or we'll all be dead." Ilara drew her weapon, her eyes scanning the room for any movement. Nolan and Aisha took positions by the door, ready to defend their team to the last. A deep hum vibrated through the station. The terminal flashed, and a series of cascading holographic interfaces sprung to life before them. The glowing symbols seemed to pulse in rhythm with Karen's breathing, the code's final layer beginning to process. The Guardian's voice boomed through the chamber again, louder this time, filled with rage and fear. "You think you can control the Solan? You are nothing. Insignificant insects, unaware of the power you've unleashed. Kieran's hands moved faster, his face contorting in concentration. I don't need to control it. I just need to release it. A blue light shot up from the terminal, bathing the room in a dazzling, unearthly glow. The ancient machinery hummed to life as the code reached its final form, unlocking its immense power. The entire control room seemed to pulse with it, and the air itself felt charged with energy. Then, in one final, deafening moment, the room went silent. The blinding light faded, replaced by the calm hum of the terminal's final command. The station groaned again, but this time, it was different. The system's defense grids activated, sending a surge of energy through the crumbling walls. The Zenith fleet's weapons were now being deflected by a force field stronger than anything they had ever encountered. The Guardian, still ensnared in the ancient tendrils, let out a guttural scream as the power of the Solan Code overwhelmed it. Its body began to disintegrate, piece by piece, as the code's energy wiped out its corrupting influence. A ripple of light surged out from the terminal, a shockwave that rattled the station's foundation. And then, silence. Ilara stood motionless for a moment, the magnitude of what had just occurred settling in. The Solan Code had been fully unlocked, its legacy fulfilled. It was no longer just a weapon, it was humanity's salvation. But there was still the matter of the Zenith fleet. Kieran wiped the sweat from his brow, a grim smile spreading across his face. We're not done yet. We've just bought ourselves some time. Ilara turned toward the door, her resolve hardening. Then we finish this. For humanity. With the full power of the Solan Code at their disposal, they would no longer be fighting for survival. They would fight to take back the galaxy, and nothing would stand in their way.